So every time cartoon shows get cancelled or shafted into obscurity until they eventually get cancelled, it's only natural that the fans of those cartoons would not be satisfied, reasonably so. I am on the other hand surprised by the elitism present during this phase of the series' downfall. Like, I've recently noticed a trend of people policing when and who is allowed to complain about the poor treatment of a series by the network. And while I can sympathize with this sentiment because I understand that there are a lot of people who during these dooming phases suddenly they start caring about the series despite the fact that they had never shown this kind of enthusiasm during the period when the show would have needed the most, which is when the series was normally running. And I can see how you can develop resentment towards these types of people, especially in cases where they're just pretending to care for the clout. But despite that, I still believe that this rage being thrown at is a little bit unnecessary and uncalled for. I think the most important thing people need to keep in mind when it comes to this topic is that there is a fuck ton of media out there. And I'm not just talking about cartoons, there's also live action media, video games, books, music, and so on. Realistically, it is impossible for a human being to consume everything that has ever been released, even if they only choose to consume stuff they like. It's just not possible. So if someone comes along late and suddenly starts getting interest in the series that is either about to or is already getting cancelled, they're not always doing it maliciously or out of lack of real interest in the series. They were just busy. I mean, there are a ton of stuff that I myself put on hold, and I think a lot of people have it in their heads that the longer someone puts something on hold, the more apparent it is that the person doesn't genuinely care about the thing, but that doesn't always have to be the case. People organize their daily lives differently depending on various factors. For example, from what I've seen, I like Christopher Nolan's works more than most of the cartoons out there. I haven't seen Dunkirk yet, and there are a lot of reasons for why I haven't. For one thing, it's a movie, and I'm more prepared to consume a series than a movie, especially since when it comes to movies, I have to pay for tickets during its release date, and I hate going to theaters, or alternatively, I could go after the DVDs and digital copies once they're out, but I have to go look for those, and I don't like buying DVDs and Blu-rays. And as far as streaming, unless what I want to watch is on a subscription service that I'm already paying, then I'll either forget about it because I will not purchase a digital copy of it in some other website that I have to dig in. The final option I would have is piracy, but over the years, pirate sites have become more inaccessible to the point where it's enough of an inconvenience to me. The other problem with Dunkirk is that it's live action, and now I don't want to get into how my aesthetic preferences work, so I'll just let that slide and instead bring up something that's even more important, which is the fact that I have a channel that's about discussing media, and most of my audience expects me to talk about cartoons and not live action stuff, which further discourages me to go watch the movie. And it's not that I don't care, I really like Nolan, and I've heard good things about that movie, but it just got fucked up by so many variables that led me to put it on an endless wait list. Now let's use Mao Mao as an example. Recently there's been debate in regards to the future of the series. Now imagine a person who heard about this news and got motivated to watch the series. Now if that person had never seen that show up until that point, all it really means is that they were busy with other things, which is reasonable. You can't blame someone for not having time, and even if they had seen it in the past but only decide to watch it now, my point pretty much still remains. I don't think anyone should be shamed for organizing their time differently. Now in situations where the person is complaining that the series isn't getting the attention it deserves, or they're criticizing the network for cancelling it, some people would argue that the person has no right to say anything on the matter because they're partially responsible for the series' downfall. Now, in the case of popularity, I don't see how late fans encouraging people to watch the series is a bad thing. I mean, the person in question is contributing to more recognition at the end of the day, and let's not ignore cases like Young Justice or even Invader Zim to some degree. We're talking about those shows as if they were overlooked gems that deserve more attention, benefited those series in the long run. Now, I personally don't have that much faith that fan outcry and demand produces that many results, at least not in the short run, but I do believe it can influence what could be made in the future based on what we as consumers are demanding from our producers. I mean, I don't know if Symbiotic Titan will ever come back. I mean, to be honest, it probably won't, but it got licensed by Netflix a few months ago. I don't think this would have happened if someone in the board meeting hadn't made the observation that there is some demand for the series, including from people who only saw the show after it ended. As for the second scenario brought up, I think there's something everyone needs to remember, and that is that sometimes networks can treat shows badly. Like, here you have Nickelodeon that expects a series to be an instant hit, much like SpongeBob and the Loud House, in order to keep them running. This is not a fucking conspiracy, everyone knows this. You also have Cartoon Network that does such a terrible terrible job promoting their old and new content and will sometimes dump them in slots or websites unannounced and in the most inconvenient periods. These networks do not give their shows a chance to prove themselves in a lot of cases, and sometimes that can even be the reason why they never succeeded in the first place. Like, there was a time when people were blaming Veliscobum94 and others like him who accused Welcome to the Wane of being a Gravity Falls ripoff and cited that as the reason why the show never succeeded. And I'm like, do you really think that's the main reason? Do you not think that Nickelodeon was partially, or more accurately, mostly responsible for the show not getting attention? Like when they suddenly stopped airing the show and then a year later they decided to dump the rest of season 1 to Nicktoons. This is why I'm not even that salty over what people consider fake fans crying about the show's treatment, because I personally don't care for most of the recent library of cartoons in Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. A lot of them could disappear and it wouldn't affect me all that much, but as someone who respects artists and creators, it does sometimes sadden me to see cartoons getting treated poorly in ways that really don't deserve, and I think it's fine for anyone to complain about it because it really shouldn't happen. I don't want the animation industry, even as broken as it already is, being an even bigger nightmare to get into. Like, am I supposed to feel ashamed and not allowed to talk about it just because I didn't watch it? Like, okay, I guess. Sorry for having sympathy for creators. I'll stay in my own little corner, I guess.